Welcome to the Scaling Japan podcast, a podcast about how to grow your business from $100,000 and beyond in the land of the rising sun.
Welcome to the Scaling Japan podcast. I'm your host, Tyson Batino, and on today's episode, we have Steve Heller. He is the COO of Hashi Media, a rising social media and influencer marketing agency based in Tokyo. They have served small to large clients such as Alibaba, MSI, and Dell. And he is here today to shed some light on the topic of influencer marketing in Japan. So several episodes ago, you might have heard one of the other founders of Hashi Media, Dustin, talk about social media marketing. But today we'll focus on influencer marketing. So it's really good to have you on today, Steve.
Yeah, thanks for having me here, Tyson. Excited to jump in and talk about the state of influencer marketing here in Japan.
Excellent. And could you give a short introduction?
Yeah, absolutely. So as you said, I am the COO at Hashi Media. We're a digital agency based in Tokyo. We're sort of a 50-50 split of Japanese natives and foreigners, which gives us a unique perspective on how to serve foreign business here in Japan, but also how to represent the Japanese ideals for companies in Japan trying to promote themselves overseas. And we specialize in the sort of APAC region, but then also support in the US when needed. In terms of my background, I come from the video game industry. I've worked in that industry for 10 or so years. Started out as a journalist, then became a game developer, and then became a live streamer as a profession for a little while. And now I'm here in Japan doing digital marketing. So,
excellent. And it's always very, very easy to interview another podcaster, but
yeah. It's definitely a unique skill set. So yeah, hopefully this flows pretty well.
Okay. Yeah, I saw the mic and I was like, okay, I know what he does. I know the secret.
Yeah, that's it.
So I guess, yeah, we can dive straight in, but please tell us, what exactly is influencer marketing?
Yeah, so like if you take marketing as like the catch-all of everything on social media, then almost everything could be considered influencer marketing in some way. But what we're talking about today is specifically working with content creators. A sort of term that's being thrown around the industry a lot is KOL, which is key opinion leader. But basically it's targeting those people to create what feels like organic content that showcases your products in a good light. And that's sort of what we're talking about when we sort of use that term influencer marketing. Typically, you're targeting those short form video platforms these days, like Instagram Reels, TikTok, YouTube Shorts. And then our work at Hashi Media, we do a lot of partnerships with Twitch streamers and YouTube tech and game review sort of channels. Instead of going that traditional route of like the big media conglomerates or really highly established blogs, these are usually people that are working as a one-person crew, sometimes one or two people on a channel together. And that's usually the bread and butter of attacking that influencer marketing angle.
Excellent. Yeah, and I think it's really interesting. It's another channel that a company can tap into to reach their target audience.
Yeah, and it can be a double-edged sword, right? Because coming from the perspective of you want the content that the person is creating or the people are creating to feel organic in their own thoughts. So you can't be too heavy-handed in you must be saying this or that. And depending on your brand and the people behind it, that can be quite scary if you're handing over a product to someone to review and paying for that video, and then they come back and maybe not have the best things to say about said product, right? So you do need to be very confident in the product or service that you're trying to get some influencer marketing done for. And yeah, just sort of work with those creators to create stuff that doesn't feel like it's sales material, because the consumers on social media platforms can see that from a mile away. They can tell if someone's not being genuine and if they're just saying something because they're being paid to. So it's a very sort of difficult tightrope to walk. And a lot of it is honestly just vibe based. Like you need to just have a good vibe for the creators that you're working with. Do they gel with your company mission or your product mission? And are they likely to say something good about your product because it fits in with their lifestyle or the type of mission that they're trying to sell on their channels? So it can be quite overwhelming, especially for new brands entering this space. And it is a lot harder than just, find some popular people on Instagram, which I think is what a lot of people think influencer marketing is,
So we'll dive deeper into, how to manage the influencers and where to find them later, especially in Japan. But I think, let's keep on that line of what exactly is an influencer. And I liked how you separated it. But could you go more into it, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So coming from our perspective, like Hashi Media, we deal with a lot of tech and gaming and lifestyle brands. So we typically try to find influencers that are already creating content in that space. Like there's no point sending someone who only reviews beauty and makeup products the latest AAA video game to do a review for. Like that doesn't make sense. So finding the types of people that are making enthusiast content in the types of genres that your product fits in, that's the number one sort of field. But in Japan, what's quite different is in the West, you typically have a channel that is just doing tech reviews and that's all they do. Or you'll have someone that does like makeup tutorials and that's all they do. But in Japan, you'll have channels that typically do whatever they feel like tons of lifestyle, like they'll be doing a tech review one video and then eating ramen the next video. And that is a lot harder to sell, especially to foreign brands trying to work here in Japan, right? Because they're like, why is this person who's cooking also going to review my game for X amount of dollars? Like that doesn't make sense to them. So yeah, it is a little different here because I feel like most, especially the really, really popular influencers, they are sort of a catch-all sharing their lives on social media as an influencer platform, as opposed to the West where everyone is sort of very targeted in their own niche and maybe only doing occasional videos outside of that.
Okay. Yeah, because they kind of made me think of Hikakin.
Exactly.
I think like what exactly does he do?
Yeah, that's exactly right. But the funny thing is, everyone that comes to us from the West, especially bigger companies, they've heard of him. They know what he is, but then they find out the price of that influencer and they're like, "Ooh, that doesn't make sense." And then they see that they don't just do gaming content, and then they're not so interested in that anymore. And that's not to say that the other type of influencers, kind of like what we have in the West, they do exist here in Japan. They're just typically a lot smaller. They're usually not. They're not breaking through to that sort of mega success that a lot of the Japanese agencies are scooping up as their in-house brands like Hikakin and obviously manage him and a bunch of other channels in that vein. So
gotcha. Are there any other types of influencers that are unique to Japan?
I would say that there are certainly a style of influencer that's very unique, and that is just the lifestyle living in Japan, typically doing a lot of shoots at cafes and stuff, but for everything else in their lives. So typically in the West, you'll see people like who are doing like foodies and blogs about like food and cafe culture. Like they're the type of people that will shoot in a cafe. You'll see a lot of typically women here, just like, I'm at this cafe, I'm drinking a coffee. And then the third image in their Instagram carousel is the product that they're selling that is absolutely not at all related to cafe culture or food. Like it's very tangentially like, this is a person that has a following who posts about their daily life and tries to somehow shoehorn the product into it. And yeah, that's hard to sort of explain to Western audiences because like that content does work here, where in the West we see that. We're like, why is this person posting about a can of soup while they're at their son's soccer game? Like it doesn't make sense, right? But here that is, I think, a type of influencer that does exist and does quite well.
And I was going to ask you, I think some of the audience might not actually know this, but what is a talento?
So a talento is like, Yeah, that is a good question. How do we describe that? That's someone who's basically aspiring to be on television or to be known as like they have a gimmick essentially that they're known for, and then they work in a lot of those brand deals into. I'm this gimmick who says the same thing, or I wear the same clothes every time and pull this pose, and that kind of helps them grow, I guess, their cachet or their knowledge against. Amongst people on social media. I think that's probably how I would describe it. I'm not sure if you have a vibe on how you would describe that.
No, I think that's a very good and easy and simple way to understand.
Like I think for me, the thing that always comes to mind, right, is that Simpsons episode where like Bart says, "Eat my shorts" on TV, and then everyone's like, do it, say it," and that's what these people are. They're Bart Simpson constantly repeating that phrase, and that's what makes them famous.
Yes, and I know a lot of them. I've listened to on Japanese TV where they have shows where, like, let's say, well, celebrities can discuss their concerns, and usually with the talentos, it's like, how do I evolve?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're very typecast in your sort of lane, I guess, when you're in that sort of space.
So I think probably a new trend is they're trying to do. Many of them are also doing YouTube while they're still popular, or YouTube or other social media.
Yeah, definitely. I can't remember the person's name, but she's a weather lady on one of the major news networks here that also does game stuff on YouTube. And it's like spinning off, like she's quite famous. She's on TV every night presenting the weather to everyone, but then has this channel on YouTube where they're just doing game reviews and stuff like that. Like it's kind of interesting to see people that you would consider being quite high up in their fields be also doing that stuff on the side.
And I guess probably my last question in terms of just what is an influencer exactly is what are the tiers of influencers?
Yeah, so this is interesting, and a lot of this comes down to how your agency scope things out. So at Hashi Media, we sort of have our own internal scope for this, where we have grassroots, what we consider grassroots, and then we have a low tier, which is sort of everyone under 250,000 subscribers on their main platform. Then we have sort of a mid tier, which is, above 250, but probably below 600,000. And then everything above that is what we call the top tier. Those numbers are pretty small. Like when you think of like top tier YouTubers in the States, right? It's like PewDiePie, who has millions and millions of followers. And there actually aren't that many creators here in Japan that have that kind of following. And a lot of that has to do with just subscriber culture in general. Like streamers that Westerners would consider grassroots that maybe only have, 10 or 20,000 followers are still capable of getting, 200,000 or 300,000 views on their video, because in Japan, not a lot of people actually subscribe to channels. That's not really the same as the culture. The hit the like button and smash the subscribe tagline that you've seen in every YouTube video, like doesn't really work here, doesn't really happen here. So it's a little hard to sort of categorize that. And the other big thing too is that anyone that hits sort of any sort of success is immediately scooped up by one of the major agencies. As we mentioned, there's a couple of others out there like Grove, or if you go even bigger than that, you got, don't want to say their name right now, but Johnny's and those sorts of agencies are starting to scoop up YouTube talent as well. So that's it's a little bit hard to categorize, but the prevailing theme is it's definitely not the same as the West. Channels that are much smaller here actually will have better performance than the same size in America or Australia, New Zealand, those sorts of things. So yeah, that's it depends on your agency and sort of the goals that you're trying to achieve for your clients, I guess.
Interesting. I guess in the West, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube are some of the big platforms, Twitch, but what are some of the media platforms influencers use in Japan?
Yeah, so from our findings, like Instagram is definitely one of the biggest platforms here, but TikTok is really catching up. So there's a lot, especially with the younger generation and creative artist type creators, definitely are using TikTok a lot more. Surprisingly, even though we work in the game sector and we're doing a lot of that sort of stuff, we hardly ever work with Twitch streamers. Twitch is not really a strong platform here. And people who are quite big on Twitch here are like very, very small in the scheme of worldwide success on that platform. And they also don't do a lot of sponsored streams. The only sort of space that we see Twitch growing is amongst the esports community, if you're getting into that space. In terms of just platforms that Japan only, like we actually don't deal with a lot. Like when I first moved here to Japan, all I was hearing is Nico Nico Doga is like the platform. Anyone who wanted to say, oh, hey, I know this Japanese thing that no one else knows, so I sound like I know what I'm talking about. But when you get into it, like Nico Nico Doga is not really that suitable for influencer marketing, especially if you're trying to reach that sort of 30 years or younger audience. Like they're not really using Nico Nico anywhere near as much as they're using YouTube. And the other thing I would say that it's not a new platform or Japan specific platform, but YouTube Live is like live streaming on YouTube is really big here in Japan, like way bigger than Twitch. And in the West, like no one's using YouTube Live except for like a few Twitch outcasts who got kicked off, and you got like Dr. Disrespect in America using it. But like by and large, most people are not doing a lot of live streaming on YouTube. Where here, that is definitely more of a thing.
I know Twitter's big here, but how is Twitter as a possible influencer marketing channel?
I think it's possible, but it has less of that, I guess, visual factor, right? So Instagram, when we're dealing with clients, like I'll be straight up and honest, we've never really done an influencer campaign on Twitter. Our clients are not usually interested in that because typically our influencer campaigns have a big visual or video component to it. Having said that, Twitter is probably the biggest of the platforms here in Japan. It is much stronger than Facebook. Like Facebook doesn't really exist here outside of business purposes, really. People aren't using that as a social platform. But yeah, like I think Twitter can be a place that influencer marketing can happen depending on what your product is and depending what segment of the market you're trying to chase. But the other thing to consider is the state of Twitter right now and how much you want to be spending money in that platform and how things are going to shake out, because it feels like every month we're getting new reports and new ways of doing things there. So,
hello, listeners. I'm excited to announce my live cohort course to help you increase your sales in Japan. Many foreigners struggle to turn first meetings into second meetings because they lack a sales pamphlet that follows the standard format in Japan. Even if you have a good first meeting, your internal contact will hand over your current sales pamphlet to the decision maker, and they'll take one look and say they don't get Japan. My live 4-session cohort course will teach you how to make a sales pamphlet in English using the standard format in Japan. You will receive a sales pamphlet template, more than 10 examples from Japanese companies, and a lot of feedback, so you can end the course with a sales pamphlet that gets more meetings and therefore more sales. Getting one extra deal will more than pay off the course, so joining is a no-brainer. You can find more details of the course at scalingyourcompany.com/sales pamphlet. And we'll have a link in the show notes.
And so let's say that I do want to do influencer marketing. It's, I mean, I know where they're at. I guess how would I reach out to them, and how would I maybe entice or convince them to help me?
Yeah, so the number one is like you will need to be able to write formal Japanese to be able to email these people. A lot of them will have their emails present and available, or you can hunt them down on Twitter and get in their DMs and get that information. But the big thing for working with influencers in Japan is having a extremely specific product delivery brief. So anyone who's worked on an influencer campaign in the West will probably know that you kind of have this song and dance informal email chain, or even maybe a Discord message with the creator and being like, hey, I want you to make a video on this. You can do whatever you want. I'll send you the product. We'll pay you this much. Can you go make the video, please? And they'll be like, yeah, cool. No worries. I'll go do that. That cannot happen here. You have to write like a 4 or 5 page brief with the history of the product, the exact things that you want them to say, the exact things that they shouldn't say, give them a creative outline of where they can have fun with it and put their own spin on it. give like very, very, very specific details. And if there's anything like a sale campaign or something like that, you're going to have to outline all of the specific rules, like what time does the campaign start? Time does the campaign end? Can the code be stacked with something else? Can it not? What happens if I read this on a Tuesday? Can I still do it? Like, it's very, very specific. And the amount of back and forth that we have, even though we have native Japanese people on the team, to get an influencer to make a video is very overwhelming. So I imagine for a lot of companies who are not living in Japan and dealing with that on a day-to-day basis, it's almost prohibitively impossible to do it.
Why do you think that's the case?
I think Japanese people in general love information. Like if you look at any Japanese creative image, it'll have like 10 times the amount of information that the same product branding would have in the West. And they want to make sure that they do everything right to the letter. They want to know the rules of the game, and they want to make sure that us as the vendor and the client that we're representing are very happy with their work, and that everyone's sort of on the same page with exactly what needs to be done. I feel like that is a double-edged sword, because as a vendor, like, we have a little bit more control over, okay, we already kind of know what the video is going to be before they've made it, because we've had a lot of these discussions and we already know what they're essentially going to be saying a lot of the time. Where in the West, it can be a little scary where you're sort of just waiting for that video draft to come in and then find out what they've said and what they've done. But yeah, I think it's mostly just to deal with the making sure that they don't miss something, making sure that someone along the line, whether it's them, the client, or us, unhappy by something that's being created or said.
Gotcha. I guess what are like some of the differences between the tiers, and was it maybe enticing them to help?
Yeah, so a big thing that we've seen with a lot of our clients that we work with is if someone has a small let's use YouTube as an example, and I have a keyboard that I want reviewed. In the West, like, typically if someone only has 3,000 followers, 5,000 followers, they'll probably do the video for free if you send them the keyboard, right? They're happy enough just to get the product, because they get to use the product, but it also means that's something they didn't have to buy to create a video to help grow their channel. Here, even the small channels want some kind of money. And that is a big disconnect for a lot of Western brands. So someone with 5,000 followers here, they might want we'll talk US dollars. They might want $200 to do that video. And a lot of our Western clients will be like, well, why? They've only got 5,000 followers. We're like, because they value their time, and it's their time. So you have to pay. So that is a big thing. Like, you can get free videos, but it is not very common. It's usually done with, you have a partner here who has a working relationship with that creator, and they might do one for free on the proviso that you maybe are going to work with them again in the future. But that's the first expectation, is that no matter the tier, it's probably going to cost you some money. The other thing when you're reaching out, like the differences between the tiers, is like someone who has 100,000 followers is going to cost you quite a lot of money, a lot more than they would in the West. And a big thing that we see is people are like, well, our product is worth $300, and the creators here don't care about that. That doesn't matter. Like, this is their livelihood. This is the money that they rely on. So what we see, a lot of that disconnect is, as you're moving up the tiers, the cost becomes prohibitive. Even for the biggest brands in the world. And a lot of that has to do with, as you're getting to that top tier, like 500,000 plus subscribers, the agencies are then involved, and the agencies are putting like a massive markup on those fees, which is why it costs so much, which in turn makes it very hard to do influencer marketing here in Japan. So that's what we're typically doing. We're working with a lot of sort of mid-tier, low-tier grassroots streamers to create a sort of network when we're not adding that fee, and we're getting similar results as if we were partnering with one or two of the major guys who are costing 10 grand or more. Picking your battles and picking who you want to work with is probably a little bit more important than just automatically going for 3 or 4 major creators, because that cost just really quickly adds up.
Gotcha. I know you guys run an influencer marketing agency, and how does working with you be more advantageous versus doing it yourself?
Yeah, so we operate in a couple of different ways. So one, you would have our team who, as I said earlier in the show, we're made up of half of us are Japanese natives and the other half are foreigners. So we understand the mission and what you're trying to achieve and what your expectations are as a brand, probably from APAC or the US. We know what you want and what you're used to, which means we can describe the challenges that you're going to face and how they stack up compared to what you're used to. The other thing is, because we have the Japanese native side and we already have a built relationship with a lot of these creators, it's much quicker for us to reach out and get those prices and approvals. And we already have like those ballpark figures of how much this person's probably going to cost and how long it's going to take them to make a video and what that wiggle room might be. And then the other thing is we give you a specific flat fee. So we treat all of our influencer campaigns kind of like we would a PR service. So we provide a 30-day service agreement. So you're just paying us a single fee to run your campaign for 30 days, which means none of the creator fees are getting any of that markup. So, and when I'm talking markup, like a lot of these agencies, like obviously I can't name people and stuff, but they're charging 80 to 150% markup on the influencer fees, sometimes even more, which makes the influencer really unaffordable, which then means they're getting less work. And they're also not seeing like a lion's share of the money that we're putting forward to here for the creator. So yeah, we are trying to really change that. While we've got these smaller creators, they're getting all the money, which is helping them grow and helping them build their businesses. And you already know at the offset, like this is how much this person's going to cost. This is how much Hashi Media's fee is. And it's kind of all set from the start of the campaign.
So I think you probably just answered it right there. But if you could answer, what are some ways that a person could know that their agency that they're in discussions with isn't doing that type of markup?
Just do your research. You could probably ask them. I don't know if they would tell you, but basically any of the major Japanese agencies that we have had contact with, that we have worked with creators who are with them or used to be with them, is facing this fee, is facing sort of this problem, I guess. But for a channel to grow and hit that sort of, this is not a hobby anymore, this is my full-time job, joining one of these agencies is typically the only way they can go forward. And this is almost, reminiscent of how the talent industry for TV and everything and music and everything here works. They're all controlled by the agencies. There's very little independent artists out there doing this sort of stuff. And the same thing's happening in this influencer space. So yeah, I guess it's, if they have a massive website and have people like Hikakin and other big YouTubers, they're probably doing this sort of practice. And like, that's totally fine. That's the business model that they have created for themselves. But the big issue is we're dealing with a lot of smaller brands like indie games, for instance, who only have a budget of maybe $8,000 total for their marketing. Like $8,000 with one of those wouldn't even buy them one creator. So they typically will skip doing any marketing in Japan because they think it's too expensive. So that's the mission that we're trying to change there. That's the perception that we're trying to change. And we're trying to give people an option because Japan, especially for the gaming sector, right? Japan is an important market for that sector. And there are other sectors too that your product would probably do well in Japan, but the perception is you can't afford to market there because it's so expensive, especially in this influencer space.
You pretty much gave the answer. It's you can ask the agency directly. It's on how is their pricing structure, versus like the management fees versus the influencer fees, and how much a specific influencer costs. So
exactly.
And based on how they respond, you'll have to use your best judgment.
And like, once again, I got to be careful with my wording, right? But like, we have worked with influencers who were previously we got prices for influencers from agencies, and when we spoke to the influencers directly, they were very different. Like, that's all I can really say about that. So it's definitely it's a bit of a battlefield here, and I do think that a lot of the foreign-run agencies that are starting to do influencers are trying to adopt a different model because they have seen the same thing that we saw a couple of years ago. So it could be a time of change for influencer marketing in Japan, but I guess time will tell.
I'll ask a couple more questions on the marketing, or sorry, more for the company side. Then I'll also want to ask a little bit about maybe the listener might actually be a foreign influencer in Japan, some things for them. But for the corporate side, so I'm just mentioning here, just so if there's any listeners, I'm not leaving you out. For the corporate side do you have any other tips for maybe a company doing effective influencer marketing in Japan?
Yeah, so number one would be 100% create a major time buffer. So a lot of influencer campaigns in other regions, like you can get done in 30 days from I've thought about doing it, I've sent some emails, and I got my video. Here we are typically taking sort of 2 months to get an influencer campaign off the ground. And that's because of the briefing process that I discussed earlier, because so much work has to go into getting the brief done. And even with that brief, we'll get just the most random questions from the people, to a point like, let me give you an example. These headphones that I'm wearing right now, listeners can't see these headphones, but like we had people asking about this one specific frequency response time that even the engineers at this company didn't know, right? And that is something that they needed to know before they would say yes to the campaign. So definitely have a buffer time. Like you cannot, if you're doing a global launch and you want to do something in Japan and you come to us with 30 days notice, like we won't take your campaign because it's just not possible. So that would be number one for a corporate deal. Someone working at a corporation would be definitely plan sort of 3 months in advance. You won't be doing the work for the whole 3 months, but you need that buffer time to make sure you have plenty of time for approvals and delivery. The other thing that I would say is definitely have a clear objective of what you want to do. Is the campaign about e-commerce stores and running campaigns? Is it about just product awareness? Is it focused on reviews? Do you just want some guerrilla marketing on Instagram Reels and TikTok, where you just want the brand awareness to go out via some videos? Have a clear objective of what you want to achieve and how you think that you could achieve it. And then you'll probably come to an agency being like, I want 20 videos. You should probably halve that expectation because of the pricing that I laid out. Because even those smaller creators are typically going to ask for some money. So we might be able to get you 20 videos, but it's probably going to cost like a major portion of your budget. And we would suggest that every campaign has at least 1 or 2 mid-tier creators, because they create a buzz that then all those smaller videos feed into, and it snowballs, right? So yeah, I would definitely go in with those expectations, and that gives you a lot of room to scale for the project based on you're not running up to the last yen for every project. You have some in reserve. So if the right creator at the right time and their timelines line up with yours, we can snag them and they aren't missed out because we spent all the budget too early.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Scaling Japan. In addition to serving as your fine host, I also provide advisory and coaching services to business owners who want to 2x, 5x, and even 10x their business. So stop holding your company and your team and your employees back, and let me help you and your company scale. Find more information at scalingyourcompany.com. Now back to the episode.
For those who might be more new to influencer marketing, it's how would you measure the success of a campaign or using an influencer?
Yeah, so we typically, when we run a campaign, we will provide a report, and a lot of that will just break down your sort of cost per view. So having a decent cost per view is always a good measure of success. Obviously, having traffic analysis on like if your product sales went up in the region based on when those videos came out, did you see a spike of traffic, is another good way to do it. And for anything that's like sales based, like having individual tracking links for creators or a coupon code in the store, so you can like physically, or not physically, you can definitely track like, okay, this coupon code was used X amount of times, which generated X amount of revenue. Like those are all pretty good indicators that it's working. Not every creator is going to hit, even if they are the most perfect candidate for your product. and it's great timing. Sometimes videos just don't hit. That's always something that I try and tell people about influencer marketing. A great example of this was back in my game development days. One of the games that I was working on, the night before release, PewDiePie played it. And we were like, oh my God,
yeah,
we're going to be millionaires tomorrow. And that game sold 5 copies on day one. PewDiePie's video did absolutely nothing, did not move the needle, even though it was like the perfect angle. And thankfully, we didn't pay PewDiePie to play it, because if we had, it would have been a massive waste of money. But having said that, an article on PC Gamer 2 weeks later resulted in like 10,000 copies sold. So yeah, you can always have like the perfect conditions lined up, but it is not a guaranteed slam dunk, which is why we also try and steer people away from spending all their budget on just 1 or 2 creators. Because yeah, sometimes, and that's the other thing, like influencer marketing is volatile because of that thing. You can line up the perfect conditions and it might just not work for any amount of reasons that is not in our control, not in your control. And the final thing is have a good product. If the product's not good, it doesn't matter how much influencer marketing you're going to do, it's probably not going to work, because the creators won't be genuine about their interest and love of the product. And then anyone who buys it based on that influencer campaign is probably going to talk trash about it online, which is going to circle around into people avoiding your product and brand. So yeah, that would be my advice.
Gotcha. So they're more likely to be vocal because they bought it.
Yeah, exactly.
Interesting. Yeah, no.
Like if I'm a creator and I'm pushing a product that's not good, even if you paid me, that's going to hurt my relationship with my audience if they go and buy it and it's a bad product, right? So I think we see it less here in Japan, where people say, oh, I'm not going to do it. But it is still something that happens. In the West, I feel like it's people are either one end of or the other. There's no way am I touching this because it's going to hurt my relationship, or there's the other end of the spectrum where it's just like, yeah, I don't care, just pay me. They don't care about their audiences. I feel like in Japan, it's definitely a bit more conservative.
Gotcha. No, that makes perfect sense then. When you told me about the 4 to 5 page brief, I wasn't surprised at all.
yeah, 100%.
Maybe only 4 pages? You didn't need to give the whole manual?
Yeah. I've been in those situations for sure. But yeah, it's a standard. It's 4 or 5 pages. We try and cut it down as much as we can.
So let's kind of turn the tables, and so I guess 2 kind of topics I want to hit is more for probably more for the influencer side, probably particularly more for like a foreign influencer in Japan. And yes, I think I'll go at that angle. So I'll go general first. Like, what could you tell us about maybe the foreigner influencer market in Japan? It could be travel, it could be language, it could be experience, but so a very general question.
Yeah, you've listed the 3 genres. They're the 3 genres that foreign people make content.
Sweet.
Yeah, so yeah, typically like I am joking a little, but I'm kind of not. Like that is typically the genres that foreigners living in Japan are making content. So there's people like abroad in Japan and currently Hannah and those sorts of people that are talking about their daily lives in Japan, their trials and tribulations and struggles and the places that they visit, and food. Like just like Japanese TV, a lot of foreign content in Japan is food based, talking about all the different foods and all the special food in prefectures and all that sort of stuff. And then, yeah, you have the language people like Dogen and all those who are Japanese senseis who know more about the Japanese language than Japanese people do a lot of the time, to be honest, making all that sort of content. And that's always spicy because it has nothing but Japanese experts living in America in the comments section arguing about where they use particles in the Japanese language and all these sorts of things. But yeah, otherwise, you're not really seeing a lot of... Like, I'm not really seeing a lot of people doing reviews of products in Japanese and they're foreign. Like, that doesn't really exist. And then the other thing is, well, if they're doing a review and they just happen to live in Japan, well, then their audience is probably just all in America anyway, so it doesn't really count, right? So the only way you really can stand out as a foreigner creating content is to do something specific about your life in Japan.
Gotcha. Yeah, and I've been seeing kind of I think Chris Broad was the OG of it, and I've been seeing more like, I think people who talk about their life in their Japan, but for like a specific segment. Like one might be like having a family in Japan.
Yeah, there's a really I'm going to give a plug. I don't know this person, but I really love their content. Their channel name is Life Where I'm From, and he is a Canadian living here who exactly what you said. He talks a lot about having a family and raising a family here in Japan, but then has done a lot of documentary work about different aspects of Japanese life. Like he did a whole thing about Shinto and a whole thing about someone becoming a naturalized Japanese person. They grew up in England and handed in their passport and became Japanese, and what that's like as someone who's white but identifies as Japanese now. So yeah, there is definitely a lot of that specialized content, but few and far between. I think most of it is what I ate and what I saw, and that's typically it.
Yeah. Yeah, I was trying to think if there's any foreigners like me, more like Westerners, who do content in Japanese, targeting the Japanese market. And the only people I can think of are people who were already well known, because not through social media, but through just, television, like Atsugiri Jason, the comedian.
Yeah.
Hakun, who are famous before they use social media.
Yeah, I think there's definitely like that golden age of a foreign person on TV who got a following before social media really opened up. And like in a lot of ways, social media or SNS is running behind in Japan. So there still is, if you're a foreigner living in Japan who can make content that is appealing, there is definitely a golden window to be making that content. But it also at the same time, it kind of feels like since the pandemic, especially when people had more time on their hands, there's only so many times I can watch a video about Kitakata ramen, that you're going to the same stores that everyone else has been to. And that sort of running the risk of making all the hotspots in Japan everyone knows about. They've already seen 30 videos of the same thing. So I don't know, it could be exciting over the next 5 years to see where that foreign creator living in Japan takes, I guess, content creation here, right? Because we can only talk about those things for so long, and I feel like we're getting to the end of that road a lot of the time.
Yeah,
I don't have any predictions, but like I think it could be an exciting time for sure.
I think one of the interesting ones that I've seen come up more recently is I think it's called like Japan Insider or Japan Cider, and it's just a guy who he makes like 10 to 25-minute videos, kind of like similar to, I think, like in game you have Game Theory or something like that. But he'll do something more like, he'll talk about a recent thing that happened in Japan. So like one he talked about was how it might have been that same newscaster that you were talking about. One of the famous newscasters on YouTube was seen with, she was dating some baseball player, and like the fans were able to like to backtrack it, and and it got like such a big backlash.
Yeah, right.
And like he told like the story, like I think 10-15 minutes on that story. I think he did a pretty good one on the Johnny scandal as well.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I think like that's something I would like. This is absolutely on a tangent now, but like one thing that I'd really love to see as someone living here would be Japanese people creating content for foreigners, explaining from a Japanese perspective a lot of these things that are happening. Because living here and seeing this Johnny stuff unfold, it's a bit like, how is this happening and how did it happen and what's going on? And the only information that I can get as someone who doesn't speak Japanese at a native level is foreigners telling me what's happening, and mostly opinion based. But yeah, I think that would be an interesting segment to see grow, and maybe English is becoming more prevalent here. Maybe that is a space that Japanese YouTube content creators will step into as well.
Yeah, I'll recommend Meshida for that.
Meshida? All right.
Yeah, have you seen Meshida yet?
No, I have not.
He's more on he's a Japanese male comedian, but he talks more about the risque side.
I think I might have seen like a video in my feed on that actually. All right, I'll look that channel up after this call for sure.
He's hilarious, and like sometimes they're very not PC.
So like a lot of things in Japan then.
Yeah, exactly. It's just so fun. Like, oh, he said that. It's like,
yeah.
Cool. This has been very interesting. And I guess, do you see any trends happening in influencer marketing in Japan or any potential future trends?
I think we are in this transition period. So TikTok is becoming much bigger here. And we had all the same sort of trends happening with like, we're doing a lot of edits to the beat of songs and dances and stuff. And I think even the Japanese audience is starting to get a little bit sick of just usually a woman dancing in front of the camera, not related to anything interesting. So I do think that we're seeing the trend of more in-depth content coming to TikTok and Reels, and definitely Instagram Reels are becoming so big here. Like I know we're talking about our influencer marketing, but even on our social media content creation for our clients that we do, like our Reels outperform every other piece of content on Instagram as a platform, and it is a major platform here in Japan. So I do think video content in general is just short form video content worldwide is growing, but it's rapidly growing in Japan, where typically social media stuff grows a little bit more slowly than the rest of the world. That's the closest I could say to a trend for sure.
Actually, I do have one more question. And do you have any tips maybe for like a corporation or a company who would like to work with an influencer marketing agency?
Yeah, definitely. Just reach out to us. That's the first tip, hashimedia.com. No, like seriously, just have a discovery call, or even if it's over email with your agency targets, and just see how you interact with them. Like, are they very rigid and formal and not willing to understand your product? And are they just giving you like a package and you've got to fit within that? Or are they someone that's willing to sort of sit down with you, find out what your objectives are, find out how you want to see your product marketed, and then build a plan around those things? I think those are the two things that I'm looking for when partnering with someone, especially if this is your first foray into Japan, because it is not easy to just launch a new product here. In any segment, especially if you're a foreign company. So having an agency that you can trust to tell you, hey, we don't think that will work, and here are all the reasons why, and why you should consider, is more valuable than someone who will just take your money and then run a campaign that they don't believe will work. So yeah, for me, finding a partner that you can have a conversation with and trust is really important.
Yeah, and I think that's a really, really, really good point. I wouldn't use the word swindled. My first thought was like, yeah, you probably shouldn't have entered the market, or you should have probably done a little bit more market research, and they kind of jump into things quickly. And but it's probably one reason why I do get a lot of inquiries where it's like, oh, can you help us with sales? And then it's like, no, I need to help you with product first.
Yeah. Like the way that you view your product, like, is just a way that Japanese consumers typically don't think, is a problem that we see a lot of the time. And that's not to say that can't be fixed. It's just it needs to be messaged differently in this region, right? A lot of the time. And then, yeah, just having an agency that is willing to tell you, hey, we think this is a bad idea and here's how we would fix it. As I said, rather than just like, yes, we are a marketing company, we will charge you this much, thank you. And they know that it's probably not going to work. Like, that's a bad place to be in for you as the company trying to break into this market.
Gotcha. And thanks for that. Do you have any asks or any information to share with the audience?
We are always open to anyone looking to learn more about influencer marketing or learn more about being an influencer, like both sides of that segment. So yeah, you can reach out to us. As I said, hashimedia.com has all of our contact information. And we also, like, even though we work with a lot of major brands, like we are passionate about like indie games, for instance. Like, I come from that world, so we do a lot of influencer marketing for indie games, and that's because we understand that segment and we're passionate about it. So we've found a way to make it work and be affordable for people as well. So even if your budget is not like, you know, in the $100,000 range, like and you have a small budget of, you know, 8 to 10K, then we are still very happy to work with you. And sure, we might not be able to deliver you 10 influencers, but we'll find you, you know, 4 or 5 that we believe will do a really good job and sell your product to the best of our ability. So yeah, we're open to all of that sort of scale there. So don't let the client list intimidate you, I guess would be what I'd say.
Thank you very much, Steve.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It was great.